Chapter 4 The Cursed Guardian. As the Crimson Tempest slowly pulled away from the treacherous reef, the crew worked with quiet determination, their movements a mix of fatigue and focus. The calm seas offered them a brief respite, but no one was fooled by the gentle rocking of the ship. The damage sustained during their harrowing brush with the reef was extensive, and each sailor knew the repairs would take time and skill to complete. The torn sails, the splintered wood, and the battered rigging were just a few of the signs of the ordeal they had survived. Yet, despite the exhaustion etched on their faces, there was a shared sense of purpose in the air. The ship had been saved, but they still had much work ahead. Captain Adrian Blackwood stood at the helm, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon even as his crew tended to the repairs. The once mighty Crimson Tempest now seemed fragile in comparison, a reflection of the storm that had nearly torn it apart. Adrian's mind raced as he considered their next steps. The reef, with its magical allure and deadly dangers, had proven to be far more than just a natural obstacle. Its enchantments were unpredictable, and the crew had only narrowly avoided disaster. Adrian knew that the sea was full of hidden threats, but this reef felt different. There was something ancient and powerful beneath the waves, something that could change the course of their journey in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden light over the ocean's surface, but the beauty of the moment was lost on the crew. They had no time to relax, no time to savor the calm. Their ship, though still afloat, was vulnerable. Every man aboard knew that the magical forces they had encountered were not to be taken lightly. The bioluminescent creatures, the shimmering waters, and the faint whispers of ancient power all lingered in their minds. The reef was no ordinary hazard of the sea. It was a reminder that there were mysteries out here far beyond their understanding. Despite the calm, there was an uneasy tension in the air, and Adrian could feel it settling like a weight on his chest. Liam, the first mate, worked alongside the crew, issuing orders and coordinating the repairs with practiced ease. He knew the importance of efficiency in moments like this. The longer they lingered, the more vulnerable they became to the unpredictable nature of the ocean. He paused for a moment to wipe the sweat from his brow and glanced at Adrian. The captain's face was unreadable, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. Liam followed Adrian's gaze to the horizon, where the calm water stretched endlessly, offering no indication of the dangers that still lay ahead. But Liam knew better than to trust the apparent peace of the sea. The calm was but a fleeting illusion, and both of them knew it. As the crew worked well into the twilight hours, Adrian remained at the helm, his grip steady on the wheel. His thoughts drifted back to the reef, the ancient symbols etched into its coral formations, the strange energy that seemed to pulse from the depths. There was something calling to him, something that pulled at his curiosity and his sense of adventure. The Crimson Tempest had narrowly escaped, but Adrian's instincts told him that their encounter with the reef was only the beginning. There was more to uncover, more to discover. And as the night fell over the sea, he couldn't shake the feeling that the ocean was holding its breath, waiting for them to make the next move. Beneath the calm expanse of the ocean, far from the reach of the Crimson Tempest and its weary crew, a darker force stirred. The water, once tranquil, began to shimmer with an unnatural glow, as though the very depths of the sea had come alive. A subtle shift in the currents hinted at something moving beneath the surface, something ancient, powerful, and entirely out of place. The eerie light that danced across the water's surface cast shadows that seemed to pulse with an almost sentient rhythm, as though the ocean itself were holding its breath. Slowly, a figure emerged from the depths, rising gracefully as if drawn from the very heart of the sea. Its form was both beautiful and haunting, a blend of elegance and danger. The figure's skin seemed to shimmer with the iridescence of fish scales, catching the dim light of the fading sun. Long, flowing hair swirled like dark tendrils around it, each strand moving as though it were part of the ocean itself. The being's eyes, glowing with an otherworldly intensity, seemed to pierce through the water and out into the world above, sensing the presence of the Crimson Tempest and its crew. This creature was not of human origin, yet there was an unmistakable grace to its movements. It was a being of the deep, an entity that had dwelled in the ocean's hidden caverns for centuries, untouched by the world of men. The very sea around it seemed to respond to its presence, the water darkening and shifting in intricate patterns, as if recognizing its master. The figure moved with purpose, its intentions unknown but undeniable. It was as if the sea itself had summoned this being to the surface, pulling it from the farthest reaches of the deep in response to something far more powerful than a mere storm. The eerie light around the figure intensified, casting an unholy glow that reached even to the surface, flickering across the rolling waves. The wind, which had calmed for a moment, began to stir once more, but this time it was different, colder, sharper, as if the very elements were shifting in response to this new force. The figure did not surface with a roar or a crash, but with an almost serene grace, as if it had always belonged in this world, even though it was a mystery to those who sailed upon the oceans. Its appearance was not a threat, at least not yet, but the sense of power emanating from it was unmistakable. Above, the crew of the Crimson Tempest continued with their work, unaware of the entity rising from the ocean's depths. Their focus was on the repairs, their minds occupied with the immediate challenges of their journey. But beneath them, something ancient and forceful was awakening, and the calm that seemed to stretch endlessly across the horizon was nothing more than the stillness before the storm. This new presence in the sea would not be ignored for long, and soon enough, the crew would come to realize that the magic they had encountered was far more dangerous and far-reaching than they could have ever imagined. Serena, the cursed guardian, emerged from the dark depths of the ocean with an elegance that seemed out of place against the turmoil of her existence. Her long hair, the color of sea foam kissed by moonlight, swirled around her like a living tapestry, its iridescent strands shifting from shades of sea green to silver as if reflecting the ever-changing currents. Each movement she made was fluid, as though she were more a part of the water than a creature that had once walked on land. Yet, despite the grace of her form, an undeniable sadness clung to her like a second skin. Her eyes, deep and sorrowful blue, glistened with the weight of countless centuries spent beneath the waves, a silent witness to the endless cycles of time and the unending solitude of her duty. Once a proud mermaid, Serena had once reveled in the freedom of the sea, her heart as open as the ocean itself. But that was long ago, before the curse bound her to the reef, a prison she could never escape. The curse, cast upon her by a power older than the seas themselves, had transformed her from a protector to a warden, trapping her in a never-ending loop of sorrow and duty. The reef, a place of wonder and enchantment, had become both her charge and her burden. She was bound to it, her soul tethered to the coral formations and bioluminescent creatures that thrived within its magical embrace. It was a place of beauty, but also of isolation, where her only company were the endless waves and the memories of a time before her transformation. The weight of her responsibility was not something she could ever shake, no matter how much she longed for release. Serena's presence within the reef was as integral as the water itself, her power and magic woven into the very fabric of the sea. She had watched for centuries as intruders, sailors, pirates, adventurers, dared to approach the reef, only to be repelled by her forceful will. Her curse bound her to the reef's defense, and though she could not leave, she could make sure that none ventured too close, lest they disturb the ancient secrets it held. The ship that had recently come so dangerously close to the reef had been no different. She had sensed its presence long before its crews saw the shimmering waters, and now she had risen to deal with the threat. As she hovered just beneath the surface, Serena's sorrowful gaze scanned the horizon, her heart heavy with the knowledge that her fate was sealed. The curse that kept her bound to the reef had no end. There was no hope for redemption, no way to break the cycle of guarding and condemning, forever watching the world pass by, unable to participate in it. She was both the guardian and the prisoner, a figure of both beauty and tragic power. The curse had twisted her existence into something both revered and feared, a creature of myth and sorrow. Yet, even with the weight of her endless duty, Serena could not help but feel the stirrings of something different. The presence of the ship, so close, had awakened a spark of curiosity in her, a feeling she had not known in centuries. The ocean, her only companion, seemed to respond to her unspoken desires. The waters grew still, as if awaiting her next move. She had no intention of letting these intruders near the heart of the reef, but something about them, about the ship, about their presence, felt different. It was a strange sensation, one she could not quite name, but it tugged at something deep within her. Perhaps, just perhaps, this would be the moment that would finally change her fate. She was bound to protect the reef, yes, but could it be that in doing so, she might uncover something that would break the chains of her cursed existence? The future, as always, was uncertain, but Serena could not ignore the flicker of hope that now burned within her heart. Serena's scales shimmered with an ethereal brilliance, each one a reflection of the ancient magic that had shaped her existence. They glittered like precious jewels, catching the dim light that filtered through the water, casting kaleidoscopic patterns across the surrounding coral. Each scale was a work of art, its iridescence shifting with the movement of the water, a reminder of the enchantments that had bound her to the sea for centuries. The magic of her transformation flowed through her like a current, ever-present and undeniable, marking her as both part of the ocean and its eternal warden. Her tail, long and powerful, rippled through the water with effortless grace, propelling her forward as she approached the reef. It was a thing of unmatched beauty and strength, sleek and streamlined, perfectly suited to the currents of the deep sea. As she swam, her movements were fluid and almost imperceptible, a dance of quiet determination as she navigated the coral formations she had come to know so well. The water parted around her as if recognizing her presence, acknowledging the deep connection she held with this sacred place. Her every motion was a testament to the centuries she had spent in the reef's embrace, each stroke of her tail a reminder of the endless time that stretched before her. As Serena neared the heart of the reef, the ancient runes carved into the coral seemed to stir in response to her approach. The soft, glowing light of the runes flickered faintly, pulsing in time with the rhythm of her movements. It was as though the coral itself recognized her, a living embodiment of the magic that had shaped the reef into something more than just an underwater sanctuary. The faint glow cast a serene light over the surrounding water, and Serena could feel the magic coursing through the currents, wrapping around her like an old friend. This was her realm, her domain, and though it had been her prison for so long, there was a strange sense of peace in the familiar patterns of the coral and the steady pulse of the ancient runes. The runes on the coral spoke a language older than time, one that Serena had long since learned to understand. They told stories of forgotten gods, lost civilizations, and the first guardians who had watched over the sea. Each marking, each faint glow, was a piece of the tapestry that had woven her existence into the fabric of the reef. She had been chosen to protect this place, her soul tied to its magic, and in turn, the reef had become a part of her very being. It was an ancient pact, one that had bound her to the sea, and which she could never escape. And yet, with every passing year, as the centuries blurred together, Serena had come to feel more like a prisoner of the reef than its protector. Despite the power and majesty of the reef, a nagging sense of longing gnawed at Serena's heart. She could feel the weight of the curse more keenly as she swam closer to the center of the coral, where the heart of the enchantment pulsed with an unyielding energy. She was bound here, eternally tied to the reef's protection, her only companions the ancient markings and the sea creatures that called the coral home. But with each passing day, that sense of longing grew stronger, and Serena could not help but wonder if there would ever be a way to break free from the ancient magic that held her captive. Would she remain the reef's guardian forever, or could fate have something different in store for her? Only time would tell, but for now, the glow of the runes and the pull of the reef's magic would continue to guide her, as it always had. As Serena swam closer to the heart of the reef, a deep sense of unease began to settle in her chest. The water around her seemed to hum with an unfamiliar tension, a disturbance that had not been there before. Her senses, finally attuned to the magic that flowed through the reef, could feel the subtle rift left in the wake of the violent storm. The fury of the crimson tempest had wreaked havoc on the delicate balance that had kept the reef's enchantments stable for centuries. The normally serene currents now felt erratic and disjointed, as though the magic that had long protected the reef was now strained, uncertain. Serena's heart clenched with the knowledge that the damage was no small thing. It threatened not only the reef's safety, but her own existence as its guardian. The magic of the reef had always been a part of Serena, woven into her very being. She had been shaped by it, bound to it, and had learned to harness its power over the centuries. But this was different. This was not just a small disruption in the currents. or a momentary lapse in the flow of energy. The storm's violence had left its mark on the enchantments that shielded the reef, causing cracks in the protective wards that had kept it safe for so long. Serena's eyes narrowed with determination as she flicked her powerful tail, a movement that stirred the water in a rush of energy. The currents around her shifted, responding to the call of her magic. Her hands, delicate but strong, traced ancient gestures in the water, invoking the long-forgotten words of the sea. With each wave of her hand, Serena wove the magic of the reef back together, a task that required both strength and precision. The ancient enchantments, though strong, had been thrown into disarray by the storm. They had to be re-anchored, reforged, so that the delicate balance of life within the reef could continue. Serena's power surged through the water, flowing from her fingertips and into the coral that surrounded her. The glowing runes etched into the rock pulsed in response, their light intensifying as the magic of the reef began to repair itself. It was as if the entire reef was awakening from a deep slumber, the once dormant enchantments now sparking with renewed life. As the magic swirled around her, Serena could feel the transformation taking place. The water around her seemed to calm, the agitation of the currents fading as the enchantments slowly but surely began to take hold. The cracks in the protective wards mended, stitching together the fabric of the reef's magic. The coral, once dulled by the storm's violence, seemed to brighten, its colors shifting back to their natural brilliance. The water itself seemed to sigh in relief, as though it, too, had been burdened by the chaos that had swept through. Serena's movements grew more fluid, more confident, as the magic responded to her will, healing the damage and restoring the harmony that had been disrupted. Though the task was immense, Serena did not falter. Her mind was focused, her spirit unwavering. This was her duty, her curse, and her purpose. As the final thread of magic was woven into place, she could feel the reef's enchantments settle once more, steady and unbroken. The waters around her shimmered with a renewed vibrancy, the once turbulent currents now flowing in harmony once again. Serena took a deep breath, her eyes closing for a moment, as she felt the weight of centuries-old magic coalesce around her. She had done it, restored the reef to its natural state. But deep inside, she knew that the forces that had disrupted it were still out there, and that her watch over the reef was far from over. Serena's voice, soft yet powerful, resonated through the water like a lullaby, rich with both sorrow and strength. The melody seemed to ripple through the very fabric of the ocean, the ancient words of the incantation weaving themselves into the currents. Each note she sang carried centuries of history, of memories and emotions tied to the reef and the magic that bound it. The haunting beauty of her voice reverberated across the coral, sending a shiver of calm through the once agitated waters. It was a song of healing, a plea to the sea itself to restore balance and harmony to the once stirred depths. As Serena sang, the magical energy of the reef responded. The water around her shimmered with a radiant light, swirling in delicate patterns like a dance of colors. The creatures of the reef, once disturbed by the violent storm, now seemed to settle, their erratic movements slowing as the soothing influence of Serena's song washed over them. The wounded coral, scarred by the storm's fury, began to heal as the song's magic flowed into its fractured edges. The energy wrapped around the reef's ancient structures, knitting them back together, restoring the life that had been temporarily driven away. Each pulse of Serena's voice carried an unseen force, like the caress of a mother's touch, calming the anxious heart of the reef. The colors of the reef, muted by the storm's chaos, began to brighten as Serena's magic took hold. The once dull greens and browns of the coral grew vibrant again, the hues deepening into brilliant shades of emerald, ruby, and sapphire. The water itself seemed to glow with life, the light refracting through the clear depths in dazzling patterns. It was as though the reef was awakening from a deep slumber, its colors blooming once again under the careful nurturing of the song. Even the smallest of creatures, once frightened by the violent shifts in the currents, seemed to respond, their movements now calm and synchronized with the gentle rhythm of Serena's incantation. The hum of magic, once interrupted and strained, began to return to its harmonious state. It was a quiet, pulsing energy that resonated through the entire reef, the heartbeat of the ocean itself. Serena could feel it deep within her, the familiar sensation of the enchantments settling back into place, their power flowing freely once more. The connection between her and the reef was palpable, like an invisible thread pulling her closer to its heart. The storm had shaken the very foundation of its magic, but now, with her voice as the vessel, the balance was being restored. The water around her sparkled with the renewed energy, the psalm carrying not only the magic of the reef but the strength of Serena's enduring connection to it. As the final note of the incantation faded into the water, Serena's heart swelled with a bittersweet sense of relief. The reef was healing, its once turbulent waters now calm and steady. The magical energy flowed freely again, a delicate balance restored between the natural world and the ancient forces that governed it. Serena closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to feel the peace that had returned to the depths. But even as the reef seemed whole again, a lingering sense of foreboding clung to her. The disruption, the intrusion of the Crimson Tempest, had left a mark on the reef, and Serena knew that the forces that had caused the disturbance were still out there, waiting. But Serena's task was far from finished. The magic that tethered her to the reef, the curse that bound her to this watery domain, was a double-edged sword. It granted her the power to protect the reef, to guard its ancient secrets. But it also condemned her to an eternity of isolation. She had grown accustomed to the rhythm of the sea, to the ebb and flow of the tides. But with each passing century, the weight of her duty felt heavier. Her role as the guardian of the reef demanded constant vigilance, for even the smallest disturbance in its harmony could have catastrophic consequences. The curse that had once been a source of pride had long since become a burden, one that she could never escape. Serena's connection to the reef was both a privilege and a curse. She felt its pulse beneath her skin, every shift in the currents, every whisper of magic carried on the tides. It was a deep, intimate bond, one that allowed her to feel the reef's pain and joy, its life and death. But this bond also tied her to an endless cycle of watchfulness. Over the years, she had seen countless ships sail too close, their greedy captains oblivious to the reef's importance, their actions unknowingly provoking its wrath. Serena had warned them in many ways, but some were too foolish to listen. Others had come seeking riches, their eyes fixed on the promise of treasures hidden beneath the waves. The reef, with its enchanted creatures and mysterious allure, had become a target for those who sought to profit from its magic. The ships that ventured too near the reef were not just a threat to its fragile balance, but to Serena herself. She had witnessed the greed that coursed through the hearts of men and women who believed they could take whatever they desired from the sea. Time and time again, she had intervened, using the power bestowed upon her by the reef to drive the ships away, to protect its sanctity. The glow of the reef's bioluminescent creatures would flare brightly, sending pulses of magical energy through the waters, creating barriers that would push the ships back. But while these warnings might keep the worst offenders at bay, they also left scars on the reef, scars that Serena felt deeply, as though each ship's intrusion was an injury to her very soul. Serena had seen the consequences of human greed too many times. There were those who would stop at nothing to exploit the reef's power, and the danger was ever present. She had learned to remain hidden when necessary, watching silently from the depths, her keen eyes ever alert to the movements of ships above. She had seen captains who mistook the reef's beauty for an invitation, and their ships would meet with disaster, crashing against the jagged rocks that guarded the secret heart of the reef. It was always the same: greed would blind them, and the reef would exact its price. But Serena was not a vengeful spirit. She was its protector, bound to safeguard its magic, even when it meant causing harm to those who threatened it. Yet, despite the constant vigilance and the heartache it brought her, Serena remained steadfast in her duty. The reef's power was not hers to wield. It was a gift, a legacy of an ancient world that must be preserved. The curse that bound her, forcing her to remain and protect the reef, had become a part of who she was. She had long ago accepted her fate, finding solace in the knowledge that she was the reef's eternal guardian. But with each passing day, as ships ventured closer and the world above the sea grew more restless, Serena could not help but wonder if there would ever come a time when she could finally rest, when the curse would no longer define her existence. Until then, she would continue her watch, her heart heavy with the knowledge that the balance of the reef, and perhaps even her own fate, was always one storm away from shattering. As she swam through the vibrant coral formations, Serena's thoughts were troubled, drifting like the currents around her. The Crimson Tempest had come dangerously close to the reef, and although she knew the damage caused by the ship had been unintentional, a deep sense of unease lingered within her. She could feel the ripples of disturbance in the water, a residue of the chaos that the storm had wrought. The ship's crew had likely been desperate, struggling to survive the fury of the tempest, yet even their unintended intrusion left its mark on the delicate balance of the reef. Serena had spent centuries protecting the reef from those who sought to exploit it, but this was different. These men and women were not here for treasure or conquest. They were simply surviving a force of nature they could not control. But despite their apparent innocence, Serena could not shake the gnawing feeling that the crew of the Crimson Tempest posed a threat, however indirect. She had witnessed the havoc that even the most well-meaning individuals could wreak when they ventured too close to the reef. Their presence, while unintentional, could bring forth further dangers, storms, creatures disturbed from their peaceful habitats, or even the reef's own magic reacting to the disruption. The reef was a living entity, one whose temperament could shift like the tides. If left unchecked, the ship's proximity could lead to more harm than just the damage already done. Serena's heart ached at the thought of more ships, more souls being swept into the ancient cycle of disaster that the reef seemed to bring to those who did not heed its warning. She had to consider whether to act. The ancient magic that bound her to the reef had granted her the ability to influence the sea, to guide its currents and creatures, but it had also taught her restraint. There was a fine line between protection and intervention. Serena had learned, over the long years, that sometimes the best course of action was to remain unseen, to wait and observe. The reef had survived for eons without her interference, and it was not her place to impose her will on every passing ship. Yet, the presence of the Crimson Tempest, so close to the magical heart of the reef, made her doubt that passive observation would suffice. She could feel the potential for calamity, a sense that the storm was only the beginning of a greater disruption. As she moved deeper into the heart of the coral, the glowing runes that adorned the ancient stone structures flickered in response to her thoughts. The reef's power was palpable, and its ancient magic hummed with urgency, as though it too sensed the delicate tension that hung in the waters. Serena's connection to the reef had always been strong, but now it felt as if it were pulling at her, demanding a decision. The balance of its magic had been disturbed, and it would not take much for that disturbance to escalate into something far worse. The crew of the Crimson Tempest had shown no malice, but the reef could not differentiate between intention and consequence. What might seem like an innocent venture could unravel everything that Serena had worked so hard to protect. Despite her growing concerns, Serena knew that the crew of the Crimson Tempest had not yet done irreversible harm. The damage they had caused could be mended, and the delicate threads of magic that held the reef together could be restored. But that was only if they left it undisturbed from this point on. As she swam through the luminous waters, Serena made a decision. She would watch them closely, ready to intervene if necessary, but she would give them a chance. The reef's magic was vast, and it could heal, but the crew had to be allowed the time and space to retreat, to move away from the peril they had unknowingly courted. It was a dangerous gamble, but Serena could not ignore the possibility that these humans, these souls tossed by fate, might, in the end, be the ones who unknowingly set the balance of the reef right once more. Determined to protect both the reef and the crew from harm, Serena made a silent vow to watch over them from the shadows, where her presence would remain a mystery. The crew of the Crimson Tempest had been unwitting intruders, but she could not afford to take chances. She knew that if they ventured too close again, their ignorance could trigger another disaster. The reef's magic was volatile, its power both a blessing and a curse. Serena's role was to safeguard it, to keep its secrets hidden from those who would seek to exploit it. The balance was delicate, and she would do everything in her power to ensure that it remained intact. As she moved through the dark waters, Serena's senses heightened, attuned to every shift in the currents, every subtle movement of the ship's crew. From the deep crevices of the coral and the tangled clusters of seaweed, she kept her eyes on the Crimson Tempest, her keen vision allowing her to track their every move. The ship, now safely away from the reef, appeared harmless from the surface. But Serena knew better than to let her guard down. The ocean, like the humans, was unpredictable. A single careless decision could bring destruction to both the reef and the crew, and Serena could not allow that to happen. The delicate equilibrium of her world had to be preserved, even if it meant remaining hidden in the depths. The shadows of the ocean were Serena's domain, and she moved through them with the grace of a phantom. Her silvery green hair swayed with the water's currents, blending seamlessly into the marine landscape. She was a creature of the deep, her form nearly indistinguishable from the shadows of the water. The reef responded to her presence, the ancient ruins glowing softly in recognition, as though it too knew that she was its guardian. The calm waters around the ship gave her little concern, but Serena's instincts urged caution. She knew that the real danger lay not in the storm they had just survived, but in their proximity to the reef's heart, where the magic pulsed with a life of its own. Though the ship had moved away from the reef's most dangerous areas, Serena was not so easily appeased. The ship's damage had already left scars on the coral, and the consequences of their reckless approach could ripple through the magic of the sea for some time. She could sense the faint traces of disruption lingering in the water, the subtle fluctuations of power that had been triggered by their passing. It was not enough to harm the reef, not yet, but it would take time to undo the damage. Serena would remain vigilant, watching every move of the crew, ensuring that they did not make the same mistake again. The magic of the reef could be restored, but only if the crew allowed it the space to heal. Days passed, and Serena's watchful eyes never strayed far from the Crimson Tempest. As the ship continued its journey, she followed from a distance, ensuring that the crew stayed clear of the reef's most sensitive areas. Her vigilance was unwavering, her every sense focused on the task at hand. She could feel the balance slowly returning, the ripples of magic settling back into their natural flow. But Serena knew that this was only the beginning. The reef's enchantments were powerful, and the secrets it held were as dangerous as they were precious. She would guard them until the end of time if necessary, for the reef was not just her duty, it was her home, and she would defend it with everything she had. The mermaid's silhouette faded into the depths, blending seamlessly with the shadows of the coral formations. Her long, shimmering tail swished gracefully, guiding her deeper into the labyrinth of vibrant coral and soft, undulating seaweed. The colors of the reef seemed to swallow her whole, as though the ocean itself accepted her as its eternal guardian. The haunting beauty of the underwater world surrounded her, a comforting embrace for one so bound to it. Yet, despite the serenity of her surroundings, the weight of her curse lingered, a constant reminder of her unbreakable bond to the reef. Serena's heart, though burdened with the sorrow of centuries, held a flicker of hope, a hope that perhaps one day, the curse that held her captive would be lifted. The possibility seemed distant, a dream that drifted just out of reach, like a shadow beneath the surface. She longed for the day when she could roam freely, to live as she once did, untethered to the endless responsibility of guarding the reef. But that time was not yet here, and until it arrived, Serena remained the reef's vigilant protector, bound to its enchantments and its ancient secrets. As she swam through the coral's embrace, the ocean around her felt like an extension of her own being. The ancient runes etched into the rock seemed to pulse softly with each beat of her heart, responding to her presence as though the reef itself recognized its guardian. Her fingers brushed against the familiar stones, a quiet gesture of reassurance as she passed. Though the reef had been disturbed by the intrusion of the Crimson Tempest, Serena could feel the magic slowly returning to its natural rhythm. She had mended the damage, but the responsibility of maintaining that balance would never leave her. The curse was not just her burden, it was her duty. In the silence of the deep, Serena allowed herself a fleeting moment of introspection. What would it be like, she wondered, to be free from the weight of the curse? To feel the rush of the open sea without the looming obligation to protect the reef? Such thoughts were dangerous, she knew, for they were rooted in longing, a longing that could never be fully realized while she remained bound to this sacred duty. The ocean's currents whispered of secrets, and while the answers remained just beyond her reach, Serena's resolve never wavered. She would remain as the reef's sentinel, its unyielding guardian, ever watchful, ever vigilant. The dark water seemed to carry Serena's thoughts farther into the depths as she drifted through the reef, the gentle current guiding her path. She was a part of this place, as much as the coral or the fish that swam through it. The reef had shaped her, and in turn, she had shaped the reef. It was a bond deeper than the ocean itself, forged by centuries of guardianship and sacrifice. Though the burden of the curse weighed heavily on her, Serena found solace in the knowledge that she had a purpose, one that transcended her own desires. She would remain here, in the shadows of the reef, as its eternal protector, watching over it with a quiet strength until the day came when her curse would finally be broken, and she could find peace. As Serena disappeared into the depths of the reef, the ocean around her seemed to quiet in reverence, the shimmering coral and bioluminescent creatures fading into the shadowy expanse. The reef, with its vibrant colors and ancient runes, pulsed with a quiet but powerful energy, as if acknowledging the mermaid's unwavering protection. Her presence, though unseen, lingered in the currents, a silent promise woven into the very fabric of the reef. It was as though the water itself whispered her commitment to guarding the secrets of this enchanted place, a reminder to all that the reef was not just a natural wonder but a sacred domain bound by ancient magic. The Crimson Tempest sailed on, blissfully unaware of the Guardian's watchful eyes. The ship creaked and groaned, its battered sails catching the wind as the crew worked tirelessly to make necessary repairs. The horizon stretched endlessly before them, filled with the promise of new adventures and untold discoveries. But the crew, caught up in the mundane tasks of navigation and survival, paid no mind to the magical forces swirling beneath the surface. They were unaware of the quiet figure that lingered in the depths, her gaze fixed firmly on their every movement, her intentions unknown to them. The mysteries of the sea were far from over, and their journey was just beginning. The waters around the ship remained calm, a deceptive tranquility after the chaos of the storm. The magical reef, though distant now, still held its ancient secrets beneath the shimmering surface. It was a place that had seen countless sailors and ships pass by, many of whom never knew the dangers it concealed. Serena's watchful eyes, however, would never let the reef's mysteries be forgotten. As the ship sailed further into the vastness of the ocean, she remained a silent protector, a shadow beneath the waves, ensuring that the power of the reef would not be misused or disturbed again. As the Crimson Tempest cut through the water, the adventure ahead beckoned with all the allure of the unknown. Unseen forces, both magical and natural, shaped the course of their journey, guiding them toward new challenges and hidden wonders. Yet, Serena knew that some of those wonders would come at a price. There were dangers that only she knew too well. The crew, for all their bravado and strength, had only scratched the surface of the world's mysteries. And she, bound by the curse that tethered her to the reef, would continue to protect them from the forces they could not see, even if they never realized it. With each passing hour, the ship drew further away from the reef's immediate grasp, but the shadow of Serena's presence lingered in the depths. The mermaid's vigil was far from over, and the secrets she guarded would remain locked away, at least for now. The adventure that awaited the Crimson Tempest was not just one of exploration and discovery. It was a journey that would soon test the very limits of what the crew knew about the world. And as they sailed into the horizon, they were unknowingly guided by the unseen force of a guardian whose motives were as mysterious as the waters she protected. Chapter 5: Serena's Decision. As the sun sank beneath the horizon, the once vibrant sky now a canvas of fiery oranges and soft purples, the ocean stretched out in every direction, its vast expanse both calming and intimidating. The Crimson Tempest rocked gently on the water, its sails torn and frayed, a testament to the storm's fury. The crew, their faces weathered and tired, moved in slow, methodical motions, working on repairs where they could. The sound of hammers against wood, the occasional mutterings of frustration, and the creaking of the ship were the only noises that filled the air. But despite their best efforts, it was clear that progress was slow, and exhaustion hung heavy in the air like a thick fog. Adrian Blackwood stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the darkening horizon, his mind far from the tasks of the moment. The ship's movements, though smoother now, still felt off-kilter, and the damage to the rudder and hull was far from fully repaired. The memory of the magical reef, with its shimmering colors and ancient enchantments, was a constant presence in his thoughts. They had narrowly escaped the reef's grasp, but the feeling of being watched, of something far beyond their understanding, lingered in his mind. The mysteries of the sea were vast, and Adrian could not shake the feeling that their journey had only begun to uncover them. The crew, though physically drained, had learned to fall into a rhythm amidst the chaos. Liam moved between the men, offering quiet instructions and encouragement where needed, his presence a steadying influence. Yet even he seemed to share Adrian's unease, often casting his gaze toward the distant water, as though searching for something just beyond their reach. The tension was palpable, and despite their best efforts to continue, the weariness of their situation seemed to have woven itself into the very fabric of the ship. The storm's aftermath had been harsh, but it was the uncertainty of what lay ahead that truly gnawed at the crew's spirit. Adrian's thoughts continued to spiral as he stood at the bow, the faint breeze tugging at his coat. He knew that, despite the ship's battered condition, they could not afford to linger in these waters for long. The reef, with its forgotten magic and dangerous allure, had been a warning, a reminder that the sea held secrets that could undo them if they were not careful. But what haunted him more than the damage to the ship was the nagging sense that the reef had not finished with them yet. There was something ancient there, something far older than the world they knew, and Adrian could not shake the feeling that it was calling to them, waiting for their next move. As the last light of day slipped below the horizon, the crew began to settle into a quiet routine, their exhaustion finally catching up to them. The ocean, now a dark, still expanse, mirrored the somber mood that had taken root among them. Adrian, however, could not rest. He knew that they were at a crossroads, teetering on the edge of something greater than they could understand. He had seen the reef's power, and he could feel it even now, pulsing in the depths below. The mysteries of the sea had not yet revealed themselves fully, and as captain of the Crimson Tempest, it was his responsibility to navigate whatever came next, no matter the cost. As the last light of day faded, the once serene sea began to shift. Dark clouds gathered ominously on the horizon, rolling in like a tide of ink, swallowing the sky. Adrian stood at the bow of the Crimson Tempest, his sharp eyes narrowing as the wind picked up, swirling around him in unpredictable gusts. The calm of the evening had been short-lived, replaced by a deepening sense of unease. The air was thick with tension, and the usual hum of the sea had been replaced by a heavy stillness, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. His instincts, honed over years of navigating treacherous waters, screamed at him that something was coming, but even he could not have anticipated the ferocity of what was about to unfold. The first gust of wind struck like a slap, and the ship rocked violently on the water. Adrian's hand shot out to grip the railing, his knuckles turning white as the wind howled around him. The sea, once calm, began to churn, its surface twisting and turning in wild, erratic patterns. The sails, still damaged from the previous storm, flapped and strained against their ropes, the tension in the fabric sending jolts through the ship's frame. The crew, scattered across the deck, began to shout orders and scramble to secure the ship, but the gale was already upon them, its strength far beyond anything they had prepared for. As the storm intensified, the sky darkened to an almost unnatural black, and flashes of lightning lit up the sky in jagged, brilliant streaks. The wind howled with a savage intensity, sending spray from the waves crashing over the deck, soaking the crew in icy cold water. Adrian's mind raced as he took stock of the damage already done. The rudder, still in the process of being repaired, would be nearly useless in the face of this new tempest. The ship was at the mercy of the storm, and the crew, despite their best efforts, were struggling to maintain any semblance of control. The once mighty Crimson Tempest now felt fragile, a toy in the hands of nature's fury. Adrian's voice cut through the chaos, a commanding presence amidst the panic. "Secure everything! We can't afford to lose any more sail!" he bellowed, his words nearly drowned by the roar of the wind. He moved with purpose, helping where he could, but his mind remained focused on the storm's origins. Something about the speed and intensity of this gale felt unnatural, as if it had been summoned by some unseen force. His thoughts immediately turned to the magical reef they had encountered earlier. Could the enchantments there have something to do with this storm? Was the curse of the reef reaching out to ensnare them once more? As the ship lurched in the powerful gusts, Adrian's grip on the wheel tightened, his muscles straining against the relentless pull of the storm. The Crimson Tempest groaned under the pressure, her timbers creaking and groaning as if protesting the assault. The waves rose higher, their dark faces reflecting the lightning's flash as the ship was tossed on the furious sea. The crew fought valiantly, their voices barely audible over the roaring wind, but Adrian knew that even their best efforts might not be enough. The night had descended into chaos, and the storm, relentless and unforgiving, showed no sign of abating. All he could do was hold fast, his eyes scanning the violent horizon, waiting for the moment when the storm would either pass or break them entirely. The storm hit with a suddenness that left the crew no time to brace themselves. The skies darkened as thick, black clouds blotted out the faint light of the setting sun, casting an eerie gloom over the ship. A low rumble of thunder rolled across the ocean, and before anyone could react, the first wave hit with a deafening crash. Water surged over the deck, drenching everyone in icy spray as the ship was thrust violently to the side. The crew staggered, their footing uncertain as the tempest roared to life around them. It was as if the very sea had turned against them, determined to claim the Crimson Tempest as its own. The wind, fierce and relentless, whipped through the sails with a shriek of fury. The ship's mast groaned under the strain as the gusts tore at the rigging, threatening to rip the sails to shreds. Each wave seemed larger than the last, towering over the ship and crashing down in a torrent of salt water. The Crimson Tempest groaned and creaked under the pressure, the sound of splintering wood echoing through the chaos. The storm was unforgiving, its power raw and untamed. The once proud vessel, still recovering from the damage of the previous storm, was now at the mercy of nature's fury. Adrian Blackwood, gripping the wheel with white knuckles, fought to keep the ship steady amidst the turmoil. His heart raced, but his mind remained sharp, issuing orders as his crew scrambled to secure the ship. The waves tossed the vessel like a toy, and every motion seemed to throw them further off course. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the storm's savage form in brief flashes of blinding light. The air crackled with tension, thick with the scent of ozone and salt. The crew shouted over the howling wind, their voices barely heard above the roar of the tempest. Each wave was a new threat, a reminder of just how fragile they were against the power of the sea. The hull of the ship creaked and groaned as the storm's fury battered it from all sides. The ship lurched forward with every wave, sending the crew scrambling to hold on to anything solid. The damage to the rudder was still fresh, and without full control, the ship was at the mercy of the storm's erratic currents. The crew worked frantically, their faces drawn with fear and exhaustion, trying to maintain what little order they could amidst the madness. But with each passing moment, it seemed the tempest grew more intense, as though it were alive, feeding on their struggle. Adrian's gaze never left the horizon, his mind racing to find a way to survive the storm. The ship was taking on water, and the creaking of the hull was becoming more frequent. Every moment felt like a battle between life and death as the storm continued to rage. The crew worked tirelessly, but Adrian knew that even their best efforts might not be enough. He clenched his teeth, determination burning in his chest. This was a fight they couldn't afford to lose, not now, not when they had come so far. Through the flashing lightning and deafening wind, he vowed that no matter the cost, the Crimson Tempest would survive this storm. Adrian fought desperately to stay on his feet as the storm battered the Crimson Tempest, but the ship's violent rocking proved too much. A monstrous wave, far taller than the others, surged over the deck, sweeping him off his feet and into the merciless sea. The cold water hit him like a shock, stealing his breath and sending a freezing chill through his bones. His hands reached out instinctively, grasping for anything solid, but the ship was already too far away, and the waves swallowed him whole. For a moment, the world spun wildly around him, and all he could hear was the deafening roar of the storm above and the rush of water as it pulled him deeper. The currents were unforgiving, dragging him further from the ship with alarming speed. Every attempt to kick his legs or grab for something to cling to was met with a fierce resistance, as though the very ocean was working against him. The sea's cold grip sapped his strength, pulling him under again and again, his limbs growing heavier with each passing second. Panic surged within him, but he fought to maintain control, even as the weight of the water threatened to drag him into the depths. His lungs burned, and his vision blurred as the waves crashed over him relentlessly, the storm's fury taking its toll on his body and mind. Adrian's mind raced as he tried to fight the rising tide, his instincts screaming at him to survive, to get back to the ship. But the ocean had a different plan. The deeper he sank, the darker the water became, the once menacing storm above now a distant memory. He could no longer see the ship's outlines, nor hear the voices of the crew, only the oppressive weight of the water and the endless rush of currents. The cold seemed to seep deeper into his bones, and his strength began to fail him. The surface of the sea felt impossibly far away, and his body grew weaker with every second that passed. Just as the last of his strength began to fade, a strange sensation washed over him, a flicker of awareness, as though something were watching, something far older and more powerful than the storm itself. The cold, suffocating depths seemed to pause, as if the very sea held its breath. Adrian's heart raced, but whether it was from fear or something else, he couldn't tell. In the chaos of the storm, in the dark, choking abyss of the ocean, a sense of something ancient and commanding, brushed against his mind, stirring him from his near unconsciousness. The waves didn't seem so fierce, the cold not so overwhelming, as if a force beyond him was intervening. With a final, desperate effort, Adrian reached out, his body sinking lower, his thoughts beginning to cloud. But before he could give in entirely, a powerful force surged through the water, grabbing him, pulling him upward. The darkness of the sea seemed to retreat, and a strange warmth enveloped him, though the ocean around him remained cold. The storm above still raged, but down here, beneath the waves, he felt the unmistakable sensation of being carried, guided, by something unknown. And as his vision blurred, he dared to believe that the ocean was not his enemy, but perhaps, for the first time, something willing to save him. Deep beneath the surface, where the water grew colder and darker, Serena's senses tingled with an uneasy foreboding. The storm's furious assault above had disturbed the delicate balance of the magical reef, sending ripples of unrest through the ancient coral and its glowing creatures. She could feel the pulse of the reef in her very soul, each fluctuation of energy a call that resonated with her long-held instincts. It was more than just the physical storm. This was something deeper, a disturbance of the very forces she was sworn to protect. Something had happened to the balance, something that would bring change that could not be avoided. As she swam through the swirling currents, Serena's thoughts turned to the ancient prophecy that had been passed down through her people for centuries. It was a prophecy that spoke of a time when the reef would face an intrusion so great that it would require more than just her alone to protect it. A time when the waters would call for aid beyond the realm of the guardians, beyond the merfolk, and into the hearts of those who walked upon the land. Serena had always carried the weight of that prophecy, its meaning lingering in her thoughts even as she performed her duties as the reef's protector. But now, in the wake of the storm's chaos, she could feel the stirring of that ancient promise, as though the prophecy were awakening, signaling the arrival of the fateful moment. The water around her shimmered with unnatural light as she approached the heart of the reef, her eyes narrowing as she sensed the ripple of a powerful presence. It was not an ordinary presence, it was something more. The energy from the reef's core hummed with a strange resonance, and for the first time in centuries, the familiar pulse of the magic seemed to be disrupted by an unknown force. Serena's heart raced as she realized what she was feeling, a disturbance far greater than the storm. This was the very disruption foretold in the prophecy, the sign that the time had come for her to act. Yet, she could not make sense of it. The prophecy had always been vague enough to leave room for doubt, and now, that doubt gnawed at her. Despite the unease stirring within her, Serena pressed on, her powerful tail propelling her deeper into the reef's sacred depths. The ethereal glow of bioluminescent creatures flickered in her wake, casting strange shadows on the coral. She could feel the eyes of the reef's magical entities upon her, as though they too were waiting for the answer to the question that hung in the water. Her mind raced, torn between her duty to protect the reef and the undeniable pull of the prophecy. The reef had always been her charge, her realm to protect from those who would seek to exploit it, yet this new presence felt different, far more significant than any shipwreck or intruder she had encountered before. With each passing moment, the prophecy seemed to draw nearer, the weight of the reef's call growing stronger. Serena's fingers brushed the ancient runes carved into the coral walls, their faint glow seeming to pulse in rhythm with her heart. She closed her eyes, focusing all her energy on the message that the reef was sending her, the call that she had been waiting for. She could no longer ignore it. The disturbance, the prophecy, the arrival of someone from the surface, it was all converging. Serena understood, perhaps for the first time, the true meaning of her curse. She was not just a guardian. She was a catalyst, and this storm, this disruption, was the beginning of something far greater than she had ever imagined. The prophecy, passed down through the generations of Serena's people, was both a burden and a glimmer of hope. It spoke of a time when the magical reef would be disturbed by a soul from the surface, a person not of the sea but destined to seek out its secrets. The reef, alive with its ancient enchantments, would call to this individual, and their arrival would signal the beginning of a momentous change. Serena had always known this day might come, but she had never imagined the turmoil it would bring. The prophecy was shrouded in mystery, its meaning as elusive as the tides, but one thing had always been clear: the soul from the surface would play a pivotal role in her future, and hers in theirs. Her heart quickened as she thought of the prophecy's deeper promise. It wasn't just the reef's protection that was at stake. The curse that bound Serena to this underwater realm, tethering her to the very heart of the reef, had always been her greatest burden. Her existence had been defined by it, a guardian with no end, a watcher with no freedom. But the prophecy spoke of a rare chance to break the curse, to free herself from her eternal role. However, it also warned that such a moment could only be seized if she acted at the right time, when the fateful soul from the surface arrived, seeking the secrets she had sworn to protect. This was not just about the reef. It was about Serena's own fate, intertwined with the future of those above. As Serena swam through the depths, her mind raced with the possibilities. She had spent centuries guarding the reef, never once daring to hope for her own release. Yet, the prophecy seemed to be unfolding before her very eyes, the storm and the disruption signaling the arrival of that destined soul. Her every instinct told her that this was no mere coincidence, that this soul, someone from the surface, perhaps the very one who had caused the disturbance, was the key to her freedom. But how could she trust a stranger, one from the world she had been separated from? The reef's magic had always been her life, her only reality, and the thought of stepping beyond it, of breaking the bond that had held her for so long, was both exhilarating and terrifying. Her tail moved with a swift grace, carrying her deeper into the coral's embrace, her thoughts tangled in the prophecy's riddles. Serena knew that the storm had not been a random act of nature, but a catalyst, an omen. She could still feel the lingering presence of the ship, the Crimson Tempest, that had been caught in the fury of the waves. Had one of its crew members been the one to disturb the reef? Had they come seeking something beyond mere exploration, perhaps even answers to the very mysteries that Serena had guarded all these years? She could no longer ignore the connection, the undeniable pull that seemed to draw her towards them. She was bound by her duty, but now, that duty seemed to have a new meaning. The weight of her decision pressed upon her as Serena hovered in the darkness, surrounded by the shimmering glow of the reef. The prophecy's promise of breaking the curse was no longer a distant possibility. It was an imminent choice. Should she allow the surface dweller to unlock the secrets of the reef, thus fulfilling the prophecy, or would she resist, continuing to protect the magic at the cost of her own freedom? The decision was hers, and though the reef's enchantments would forever remain a part of her, Serena could no longer deny that the path ahead was a crossroads. This moment, this soul from the surface, would determine her fate, and the fate of the reef she had sworn to protect. As the storm's wrath raged around him, Adrian fought against the relentless pull of the ocean, his limbs heavy and his vision blurred by the churning waters. The cold was seeping into his bones, his strength waning with each passing moment. His head bobbed beneath the surface, the turbulent waves pushing him deeper into the darkness of the sea. Just as despair threatened to take him completely, a figure emerged from the depths, cutting through the water with an elegance that defied the chaos of the storm. Serena rose like a vision from the abyss, her long, flowing hair trailing behind her like silver threads in the moonlight, her presence both ethereal and commanding. Serena's eyes, glowing with a soft, otherworldly light, fixed onto Adrian as he struggled against the sea's grasp. The connection between them was immediate, a force that transcended the bounds of the natural world. Her gaze was not one of pity, but of recognition. She knew him, or at least she knew that he was the one the prophecy had spoken of. With a swift, powerful flick of her tail, she closed the distance between them, her movements fluid and effortless in the water. The storm roared around her, but she seemed unaffected, a calm in the eye of the tempest. Her heart raced not with fear, but with a sense of purpose she had not felt in centuries. This was the moment she had been waiting for. As she reached him, Serena's strong arms wrapped around Adrian, pulling him to the surface with a force that seemed impossible given the fury of the waves. The storm's ferocity and the cold sea had no claim on her. She was beyond its reach. Adrian, gasping for air, blinked in disbelief as he was drawn into the embrace of a creature so beautiful and strange, a being that seemed both of the sea and of something much older, much more powerful. Serena's eyes never left his, her expression unreadable yet intense. The water around them swirled with an unnatural stillness, as if the ocean itself had yielded to her presence. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The storm's thunder no longer seemed as deafening, and the crashing waves around them lost their menace. Serena could feel the pull of the prophecy in her chest, a magnetic force drawing her closer to the captain. She had always known that the time would come, but she hadn't realized how closely it would be tied to this very moment. Adrian was the key, the soul from the surface whose destiny was bound to the fate of the reef and, perhaps, to her own freedom. The waters whispered ancient songs in Serena's ears, and she understood now that her role as the protector of the reef had always been intertwined with the arrival of this man. As she began to guide him through the storm-tossed sea, Serena's thoughts were consumed by the weight of what lay ahead. The reef, her sanctuary and her prison, pulsed beneath them, its magic still raw from the earlier disturbances. The captain was no ordinary soul. There was something about him, something she couldn't yet comprehend, but she knew that his presence would change everything. As they swam towards safety, Serena realized that she was no longer just the cursed guardian. With Adrian in her arms, the prophecy was coming to life, and it was no longer just about the reef. It was about breaking the chains that had bound her for so long. The storm may have been fierce, but in that moment, it was the beginning of something new. With a graceful and commanding flick of her tail, Serena propelled herself toward Adrian, cutting through the tumultuous sea with an almost unnatural ease. The churning water seemed to obey her movements, the waves momentarily parting in reverence to the cursed guardian. Her gaze remained fixed on Adrian, whose desperate flailing had slowed as the storm claimed more of his strength. She was close now, and as the gap between them narrowed, Serena felt an unfamiliar stirring within her, a strange sense of urgency mixed with a deep, unspoken connection. She reached out, her hands firm but gentle, grasping his body with surprising tenderness for such a powerful being. The moment their hands met, a rush of heat passed between them, an unspoken recognition in the touch. Adrian, gasping for breath, looked up to see the face of the one who had come to his rescue. Her long hair, dark and iridescent with shades of green and silver, floated around her like an ethereal halo, and her eyes, glowing with an otherworldly light, seemed to pierce straight through him. There was a quiet strength in her gaze, a profound calm that stood in stark contrast to the fury of the storm. As her hand steadied him, Adrian felt the tempest's rage subside around them, the winds howling and the waves crashing retreating as if in deference to the mermaid before him. Serena, with her tail slicing effortlessly through the water, began to guide Adrian toward the surface. The storm's relentless onslaught seemed to lose its power as she moved, the winds and the crashing waves almost parting around her. It was as though the sea itself recognized the ancient power she wielded, yielding in reverence to the guardian of the reef. The water, once tumultuous and violent, became smoother with every stroke of Serena's tail, the chaos slowly giving way to calm. As they rose, the tension in the sea began to ease, and the swirling currents that had nearly pulled Adrian under began to lose their grip on him. The storm still raged above them, but beneath the surface, Serena created an oasis of tranquility, her presence commanding the sea's magic as if it were her very own. Her powerful arms held Adrian steady, guiding him up from the depths with precision and grace, her body moving in a rhythmic dance that defied the surrounding chaos. She didn't speak, but her steady, reassuring motions conveyed more than words ever could. She was in control, a silent protector, and Adrian, though confused and struggling for breath, couldn't help but feel a deep, calming trust in her touch. The sea, which had once threatened to drown him, now seemed to yield before her, its turbulent embrace transforming into something gentle and safe. As they finally broke the surface, the storm's ferocity felt distant, like an echo from another world. Serena's hand remained on Adrian's arm, guiding him through the churning waters, her body close to his in a way that made the violent world around them seem insignificant. She had pulled him from the depths, from the brink of certain death, but she knew this moment held more than just survival. It was the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. Serena could feel the weight of it pressing down on her, the understanding that this man, this soul from the surface, was now intricately tied to the reef, to its secrets, and to the curse that had bound her for centuries. As they moved through the water, her heart, once heavy with the burden of her curse, began to beat with a flicker of something more, hope. Adrian's chest heaved with desperation as he struggled to catch his breath, the salt water still clinging to his lungs. The storm's ferocity seemed distant now, replaced by the quiet, almost peaceful rhythm of the water around him. His body, weak and exhausted from the battle against the waves, was held aloft by Serena's steady grip. Her form, glowing faintly in the moonlight that now filtered down through the storm clouds, was almost surreal. She was no ordinary sea creature. There was a grace to her every movement, an undeniable power that emanated from her like a beacon. Her eyes, glowing softly with an otherworldly light, were focused on him, unwavering and calm, as though she had always known this moment would come. His mind was a blur as he stared at her, struggling to comprehend the situation. She was beautiful, yes, but there was something haunting about her, something that spoke of ancient sorrows and untold secrets. The moonlight seemed to dance off her scales, which shimmered with shades of green and silver, like a living tapestry woven from the depths of the ocean. Her long hair flowed like liquid tendrils in the water, and her presence was both mesmerizing and unsettling. Adrian's heart raced, his body still trembling from the cold and shock. With every desperate breath, he tried to make sense of the miracle that had just saved him. With great effort, Adrian forced his parched throat to form words. His voice was hoarse and broken, but he couldn't contain the question that had been clawing at his mind. Who are you?" he gasped, the words barely audible over the sound of the still raging storm. His mind, clouded by the overwhelming terror and confusion, couldn't place her. Was she a ghost? A spirit of the sea? His eyes roamed over her form, still trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The woman before him seemed both human and something else entirely, something ancient, something that belonged to the deep waters, to the very heart of the ocean. Serena's gaze softened as she watched him, her expression unreadable yet filled with a quiet understanding. She had lived for centuries, her existence tied to the magical reef and the curse that bound her to it. She had seen countless mortals lost to the sea, many of them driven by greed or curiosity, but none had ever been pulled from the depths as Adrian had been. She had known that this moment would come, that the prophecy would unfold when the time was right. But seeing the man who would change everything, seeing him so fragile and vulnerable in her arms, stirred something deep within her. A flicker of hope, something she hadn't felt in centuries, began to stir in her heart. She didn't immediately answer his question. Instead, she adjusted her hold on him, steadying him in the water. "You are safe," she said at last, her voice melodic and soothing, carrying the weight of an age-old wisdom. Her words weren't a direct answer, but they seemed to settle over him like a blanket of warmth and calm, giving him the reassurance he needed. Adrian's gaze softened as he looked into her eyes, feeling a strange sense of connection, as if something beyond his understanding was pulling them together. Serena's presence was both a balm and a mystery, and Adrian realized, with a growing sense of awe, that she was no mere figment of his imagination. She was something far older, far more powerful, and far more real than anything he had ever encountered. "I am Serena, the guardian of the reef," she replied, her voice soft and melodic, cutting through the roar of the storm like a lullaby in the midst of chaos. Her words seemed to carry a sense of ancient power, an aura of calm amidst the violent tempest that had nearly claimed Adrian's life. The wind howled around them, and the waves continued their furious assault on the ocean's surface, but there was a profound stillness in Serena's presence. As she spoke, her glowing form seemed to shine even brighter against the backdrop of the tumultuous sea, casting a serene light that illuminated the water around them. Adrian's breath hitched as he absorbed her words. The storm, which had moments before felt like an inescapable beast, now seemed a mere inconvenience in comparison to the depth of what she was telling him. "Guardian of the reef?" he repeated, his voice barely a whisper as he tried to make sense of it all. His mind, still swimming in shock and confusion, struggled to grasp the enormity of the situation. What could a creature of the sea have to do with him, a mere mortal? And yet, as he looked into her eyes that shimmered with an ageless wisdom and sorrow, he felt the weight of her words. There was no mistaking the truth in them. Serena's eyes softened as she observed his reaction, her gaze filled with something akin to pity, but also understanding. She had known from the moment she sensed his presence in the storm that this was the moment foretold by the prophecy. The words of that ancient prophecy had echoed in her heart for centuries, a constant reminder of her duty and her curse. It spoke of a soul from the surface, a man who would seek the secrets of the reef, a man whose fate would intertwine with hers. She had long wondered when the prophecy would come to fruition, and now, as she held Adrian in her arms, she knew that this was the moment. Their fates had been bound long before he had ever set sail. "I have come to rescue you," Serena continued, her voice as steady as the ocean's deep currents. "You were meant to be saved by me, though you did not know it. The prophecy calls for you to discover the secrets of the reef, but you must do so with care. There are forces at play here, forces you do not yet understand." Her words were heavy with meaning, each one chosen with the wisdom of someone who had lived through countless lifetimes. Adrian's confusion deepened, and he struggled to process her cryptic message. The storm still raged around them, yet here she was, this otherworldly being, speaking of prophecies and fate, of things far beyond the grasp of any sailor. The storm continued its relentless fury, but there was something undeniably comforting in Serena's presence. As she held Adrian steady in the water, she gently guided him through the waves, her strength seeming to defy the chaos surrounding them. "You are not alone," she added, her voice a steady anchor in the midst of the storm. "The path ahead will be difficult, but together we can face it. The reef is not simply a place of beauty and danger, it is a keeper of secrets, and it holds the key to breaking the curse that binds me." Serena's words were both a promise and a warning, a reminder of the journey ahead, but also of the immense responsibility they both carried. Adrian's heart beat faster as the weight of her revelation sank in. He was no longer just a sailor lost at sea. He was a part of something much larger, something that transcended the storm and the waves. Despite the storm's ferocity, Serena's presence seemed to weave a protective shield around them. The raging sea, which had once been a terrifying force, now seemed to recoil from her. Waves that would have sent a normal ship spiraling into chaos seemed to part in response to her, and the surging tides were tempered as if guided by an unseen hand. With every powerful stroke of her tail, Serena propelled herself and Adrian through the water with an effortless grace, her movements precise and fluid, defying the violent forces of nature. Her tail cut through the water like a blade, guiding them steadily through the storm's thrashing, her strength unwavering as they moved farther away from the reef and towards the safety of the ship. Adrian, still clinging to Serena for support, marveled at the contrast between the madness of the storm and the serene power she commanded. The air was thick with the scent of salt and the raw energy of the tempest, but in her presence, the sea seemed to bend and sway as though it were under her control. His heart pounded in his chest, but there was an odd sense of comfort in her touch. She moved moved with a determination that matched his own desire to survive, yet there was an ancient sadness behind her eyes, an unspoken burden that he could sense but not yet understand. As they moved through the water, Adrian's mind raced, still struggling to reconcile the mythical creature he had encountered with the man he had been before the storm had swept him into this impossible situation. With each graceful movement, Serena drew them closer to the Crimson Tempest, and the ship slowly began to emerge from the chaos. The sails were torn, the mast creaking with the strain of the storm, but it was still there, still floating, still a sanctuary. Adrian's eyes strained against the dark storm, searching for any signs of life aboard, his mind desperate to know if the crew had survived the same fury that had nearly claimed his life. The ship seemed impossibly far away, but with Serena's steady guidance, it drew nearer, as if the sea itself was helping them along. Adrian's breath was shallow, but there was hope now, a flicker of possibility where before there had only been terror. As they neared the ship, the winds began to die down, and the storm seemed to lose its bite, the violence of the waves gradually receding. It was as if the very sea had recognized Serena's presence, calming itself in deference to her ancient power. The moment felt surreal, an impossible calm after the storm's overwhelming fury, as though the universe had held its breath. Adrian looked up at Serena, noticing how her ethereal form seemed to glow brighter with each passing moment. Despite the danger they had faced, there was a quiet strength in her that seemed to permeate the water around them. Her eyes locked onto his for a brief moment, and he felt an unspoken understanding pass between them. She had not just saved him, she had guided him through something far beyond his comprehension. With one final powerful movement of her tail, Serena closed the distance between them and the Crimson Tempest. The ship loomed large now, and Adrian could make out the figures of his crew, who were frantically trying to secure the ship against the storm's remnants. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. They had made it through the worst of the storm, and though the night still held its dangers, he knew they would survive. Serena's grip on him remained firm, her voice steady as she whispered words of reassurance. But it was clear that her work was not yet done. Neither of them knew what awaited them beyond this storm, but in this moment, as they approached the safety of the ship, it felt as though fate itself had given them a second chance. As they neared the ship, Adrian's grip on Serena's arm began to weaken, the exhausting struggle against the storm's violent embrace finally taking its toll. His limbs felt heavy, his body drained of strength, and his head swam with dizziness. The relentless chill of the sea had sunk deep into his bones, sapping his resolve, and every stroke of his arms seemed to take more effort than the last. The ship, once a comforting sight on the horizon, now felt impossibly far away, the swells of the sea rising and falling like mountains between them. He wanted to hold on, to stay awake and alert, but the overwhelming fatigue made it harder to keep his focus. His mind swirled with thoughts of the crew, the ship, and the ordeal they had just survived, but he was struggling to stay conscious, the weight of the storm's fury pressing down on him. Serena noticed the subtle shift in Adrian's energy, the way his body sagged, and the way his breaths became more shallow. Her heart tightened with empathy, but there was no time to dwell on it. There was still work to be done. Her sharp eyes softened with a quiet determination, the responsibility she had carried for centuries stirring within her. "Hold on, Captain," she murmured, her voice steady and calming despite the danger surrounding them. "We are almost there." Her words were not just a promise, but a pledge, an assurance she knew deep in her soul. With every passing second, they drew closer to the ship, and Serena could sense the urgency in Adrian's struggle. She would not let him slip away, not now, not after everything they had endured together. With a powerful flick of her tail, Serena propelled them forward with renewed speed, her movements fluid and graceful, cutting through the water like a blade. Her form glowed faintly, a beacon in the darkness, casting a soft, otherworldly light on the churning waters around them. She could feel Adrian's faltering grip, his weakening pulse beneath her fingers, but she refused to let that be the end of their journey. The sea roared around them, the wind still howling in the aftermath of the storm, but Serena's resolve held firm. She had carried the weight of her curse for centuries, watching over the reef and its secrets. But in this moment, she had a different purpose: to protect this man, the captain whose fate had somehow become intertwined with hers. She would not let him fall to the sea, not while there was still hope. Adrian's vision blurred, his body sinking with exhaustion, but Serena's touch was a lifeline he could not ignore. Her hands, strong and sure, gripped him with unrelenting care, pulling him ever forward. As they drew closer to the Crimson Tempest, Adrian could hear the sounds of his crew, distant shouts of urgency echoing in the night. They had to reach them. He had to make sure they were safe. But the weight of the storm, the fear, the uncertainty, it all seemed too much to bear. He fought to stay conscious, his mind flickering in and out of awareness, but Serena's presence anchored him. It was as if her very being was infused with the strength of the ocean itself, a force of nature that refused to yield, and it gave him the strength to keep going, even when every fiber of his body screamed for rest. With the final burst of energy, Serena guided them to the edge of the Crimson Tempest. The ship's crew, now visible, scrambled to throw down ropes, their faces filled with both relief and shock at the sight of their captain in Serena's arms. As the ropes were thrown and Adrian's weary body was lifted aboard, Serena's eyes met his one last time. The connection between them was silent but deep, an understanding that their fates had been intertwined in ways neither could have anticipated. Adrian's strength had all but abandoned him, but in that moment, he realized that Serena's resolve had carried him through. She had fulfilled her part of the prophecy, and as the crew pulled him aboard, he could feel a new chapter of their journey beginning, one shaped by the mysterious guardian of the magical reef. With a final burst of effort, Serena propelled herself and Adrian through the churning waters, her powerful tail cutting through the waves with a speed born of urgency. The storm had not fully passed, but the worst of it seemed to relent as she drew closer to the Crimson Tempest. Her muscles burned from exertion, but the sense of duty that had guided her for centuries spurred her forward. Every stroke of her tail brought them closer to safety, closer to the ship that represented hope for both her and Adrian. The ship's dim lights flickered in the distance, and Serena could see the figures of the crew moving frantically on deck, their eyes widening in shock as they spotted their captain's unconscious form drifting in the water. The crew wasted no time. Several members rushed to the railing, shouting orders to one another as they quickly secured a rope, preparing to throw it overboard. Serena's breath was shallow, her movements beginning to slow, but her resolve was unshaken. She watched with a mixture of relief and sadness as the rope was tossed toward them, the thick coils unrolling in midair. Adrian's limp body, heavy with exhaustion and soaked from the sea, was almost impossible to lift on her own, but she held him steady as the rope fell closer. In that fleeting moment, Serena realized how much she had risked, how much she had given to ensure his safety. And yet, despite the task's toll, there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that he was on the brink of safety. With the rope now in hand, Serena took one last glance at Adrian before she released her grip, her fingers gently loosening around him. She could feel the pull of the ocean, the call of the deep that had been her home for so long, but she knew her place was here, in this fleeting moment, guiding him to his crew. The sounds of the ship's crew shouting instructions echoed in her ears as Adrian's body was swiftly hauled up by the men on deck, their rough hands pulling him to safety with practiced ease. Serena lingered in the water for a moment longer, watching as the crew worked together, lifting their captain with care and urgency, before the last of her strength gave way. It was time for her to retreat into the depths, to once again fade into the shadows of the reef, her task completed, for now. As Adrian was pulled aboard, his drenched form was quickly enveloped by the crew, who worked quickly to get him to his feet. Despite their relief at seeing their captain alive, a few of them hesitated, still eyeing the water warily. The storm was not yet over, and there was a palpable sense of unease in the air. But their focus remained on Adrian, who had miraculously survived the violent storm. He looked dazed, his eyes blinking against the rain and wind, but there was something more in his gaze, a recognition, perhaps, of the presence that had saved him, though he could not fully comprehend it. Serena watched from a distance, her heart heavy but hopeful, knowing she had done what she was bound to do. Her time in the surface world was fleeting, but for this moment, her role had been fulfilled. Serena's form began to fade into the shadows of the sea as the crew helped Adrian back onto the deck of the Crimson Tempest. The storm continued to rage overhead, but the immediate danger had passed. Adrian stood shakily, supported by the crew, his eyes scanning the water one last time as if expecting to see the figure that had saved him. But the ocean was silent now, the only sound the steady crash of waves against the ship's hull. Serena's task was done, but the story of their fates, woven together by a prophecy, was just beginning. As she disappeared into the depths, she carried with her a flicker of hope that one day, the curse binding her to the reef might be lifted, and she could find peace. But for now, she remained the guardian of the reef, ever watchful, ever vigilant. As the last echoes of the storm faded into the distance, the turbulent ocean seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. The once ferocious winds died down, leaving only a gentle breeze that ruffled the damp sails of the Crimson Tempest. The monstrous waves that had battered the ship were now a mere ripple on the water's surface, their violent crash reduced to a faint murmur in the distance. The ship, which had been at the mercy of the tempest just moments before, now bobbed gently on the water, rocking in a peaceful rhythm that felt almost surreal after the chaos that had just unfolded. The crew, weary and drenched, stood in stunned silence, looking out over the now calmed sea. The horizon stretched endlessly before them, a stark contrast to the storm they had just weathered. In the quiet aftermath, a sense of calm had settled over the ship and its crew. Adrian, though still recovering from his near-drowning, stood at the helm, his gaze sweeping over the now calm sea. His breath was steady, though his body ached from the ordeal. His thoughts lingered on the moments of his rescue, the image of the mysterious figure who had saved him burned into his mind. Who or what had come to his aid? He could not shake the feeling that the storm's sudden end was no coincidence, nor could he ignore the strange and powerful presence that had guided him from the depths. It was as if the sea itself had been altered by Serena's actions, its energy shifting with the completion of her task. Serena, the cursed guardian, had vanished into the darkness of the deep, her ethereal form receding into the shadows of the magical reef. She moved with the grace of someone who belonged to the sea, her connection to the ancient power of the reef unbroken even as she withdrew from the surface world. Her presence, though no longer visible, still lingered in the water, as if the very ocean held her memory. The reef, now restored and calm, pulsed with a steady, almost imperceptible hum of magic, a quiet reminder of the Guardian's watchful eye. Though Serena had completed her mission, the bond between her and the reef remained unshaken, her role as its protector eternal. For a moment, all was still. The crew of the Crimson Tempest remained on deck, their attention divided between the sea around them and the captain, who appeared lost in thought. Adrian's hand gripped the wheel of the ship, his mind a whirlwind of questions. Who was the mermaid who had saved him? Why had she chosen to rescue him? And what was the meaning of the prophecy she had spoken of? He knew that the answers to these questions lay somewhere beyond the horizon, just out of reach, and the uncertainty of it all gnawed at him. Yet, there was also a strange sense of peace settling over him, as though the storm had not only passed but had also paved the way for something new, something yet to be discovered. As the ship drifted further away from the reef, the magic that had once surged so strongly beneath the water began to recede as well, leaving behind a lingering sense of quiet anticipation. The Crimson Tempest was safe for now, its crew intact and their spirits somewhat lifted by their miraculous survival. But the mysteries of the reef, and the presence of Serena, would not be easily forgotten. There was a sense that the sea had offered its protection for a reason, and that the journey ahead held even greater challenges. With a final glance at the sea, Adrian turned toward his crew, his face set with determination. The adventure was far from over, and the reef's secrets were only the beginning of the story that was unfolding before them. Adrian stood at the edge of the deck, his soaked clothes clinging to his skin, his body still trembling from the shock of his near drowning. The wind had died down, leaving only a gentle breeze that whispered through the sails, carrying with it the salty scent of the sea. The waves, once a violent force, now lapped peacefully against the ship's hull. Adrian's gaze was fixed on the horizon, but his thoughts were far from the calm sea before him. His mind raced with the memory of the mysterious mermaid who had saved him, the graceful, otherworldly figure who had appeared from the depths of the ocean. Her touch had been both strong and gentle, as though the sea itself had come to his aid. He still couldn't fully comprehend what had just happened, but he knew one thing for certain. Their journey had just taken a turn into the unknown. The crew, though still recovering from the storm's fury, gathered around Adrian, their faces a mix of concern and relief. Liam, ever the first to check on the captain, was the closest, his brow furrowed as he looked at Adrian's exhausted form. "Captain, are you all right?" Liam's voice held a rare softness, his usual bravado tempered by the gravity of the situation. Several other crew members stood nearby, their eyes lingering on Adrian, silently waiting for any sign that their leader was truly okay. Though they had seen storms before, they had never witnessed anything like this, never seen their captain nearly claimed by the ocean itself. The relief that he had been pulled back to safety was palpable, but the unanswered questions hung in the air like a fog. Adrian's chest heaved as he took in a deep breath, his body still cold from the water, but his heart racing with the adrenaline of the encounter. He turned slowly to face the crew, forcing a smile despite the unease still gripping him. "I'm fine," he said, his voice hoarse, though it held a note of certainty. The crew didn't need to hear more, for his presence alone reassured them. They had witnessed his strength countless times before, and now, seeing him on his feet, even in the wake of such an ordeal, was enough to restore their faith. But the captain's mind was elsewhere, caught in a whirlwind of thoughts about the mermaid, the reef, and the prophecy she had spoken of. There was a deep, unspoken understanding among the crew members that something had shifted, that this storm, and their survival, was not a coincidence. As the silence stretched between them, Adrian's eyes moved away from the crew and back to the horizon, where the last remnants of the storm clouds were slowly dispersing. The sea now seemed tranquil, almost serene, but Adrian knew that beneath the surface, there was something far more powerful at play. He could feel it in his bones. The eerie calm that followed such chaos was never truly a sign of peace. Something ancient and potent had awoken, and it had chosen to intervene in his fate. He didn't know why, or what the mermaid's presence meant for them, but the connection between the reef and their journey was undeniable. He could sense that whatever awaited them was tied to the secrets of the ocean and the forces they had yet to fully understand. Turning back to face his crew, Adrian squared his shoulders, pushing aside the swirling thoughts in his mind. "We've made it through this storm, but we cannot ignore the power that still lingers beneath the surface," he said, his voice steady, though the weight of his words was not lost on them. The crew exchanged looks, their expressions a mixture of exhaustion and determination. The captain had always led them with unwavering resolve, but this encounter had changed something in all of them. They were no longer just sailors on a ship. They were part of a much larger story, one entwined with the very heart of the sea. With a final nod, Adrian turned back to the wheel, his fingers gripping the ship's helm with a newfound sense of purpose. The Crimson Tempest had survived, but their true adventure was just beginning. "Captain, are you all right?" Liam asked, his voice filled with worry, as he stepped closer to Adrian, his eyes scanning the captain's drenched form. The storm had subsided, but the tension in the air was still thick, lingering like the remnants of a nightmare. Adrian stood at the ship's edge, his soaked clothes clinging to him, the salt water dripping from his hair. His usually confident stance was now slightly slouched, as if the weight of what had happened was beginning to settle on him. Liam's concern was evident in his furrowed brow, the way he held back from reaching out, unsure if the captain needed space or support. The crew, though they had been through storms together, had never seen Adrian like this, vulnerable, shaken, and perhaps even a little lost. Adrian's chest rose and fell with slow, steady breaths as he turned to meet Liam's gaze. There was a long pause before he spoke, the exhaustion in his eyes betraying the calm he tried to project. "I'm fine, Liam," Adrian replied, his voice rough from the cold seawater, but he gave a weak smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's just a lot to process." His fingers grazed the edge of the railing, the grip tight as if anchoring himself to the present moment. The storm had felt like an overwhelming force, but the true weight of it, the mystery of the mermaid, and the eerie calm that followed the chaos, lingered far beyond the storm itself. He could feel it, Deep in his gut, the sense that there was more to this encounter than mere survival. Liam studied Adrian's face carefully, as though weighing his captain's words against the uncertainty in his expression. There was something unsettling about the way Adrian spoke, as if he wasn't fully present, as if his mind was drifting far away, lost in the depths of the sea's mysteries. "You don't seem fine," Liam said softly, his usual bluntness tempered by the genuine concern that only came when the stakes were high. He was no stranger to danger, having sailed with Adrian through countless storms and challenges. But what had happened tonight, what they had witnessed, was beyond their understanding. The captain's near-death experience and the strange intervention of the mermaid were things neither of them could explain, and that uncertainty gnawed at him. Adrian turned his gaze back to the now quiet sea, his thoughts still swirling. The storm was gone, but its aftermath felt heavy, both in the air and in his chest. He had faced countless dangers on the open water, but something about this storm, this encounter with the unknown, felt different. It was as though the ocean itself was alive, watching them, guiding them, or perhaps testing them. And then there was the mermaid, Serena. Her ethereal presence, the prophecy she had spoken, the way she had saved him. It was all too much for his mind to fully grasp, but one thing was certain: their journey had taken a turn that neither he nor the crew could have anticipated. There was no going back now. Liam, seeing the distant look in Adrian's eyes, hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "We'll get through this, Captain," he said, his voice firm but reassuring. "We've faced worse storms, and we've always made it through." The words were simple, but they held the weight of countless shared experiences, battles against nature, against enemies, and against the unknown. The crew trusted Adrian with their lives, and though the captain's silence spoke volumes, Liam knew that Adrian's resolve would carry them forward, as it always had. It wasn't just the storm they had survived, it was something far greater, something that was only beginning to reveal itself. And no matter what came next, Liam believed that with Adrian at the helm, they would navigate it together. Adrian nodded, though his eyes remained fixed on the horizon, as if the sea itself held the answers he was searching for. His fingers, still trembling slightly from the cold, curled around the ship's railing. The storm had left him physically drained, but it was the weight of his thoughts that seemed to burden him the most. The calm, quiet ocean stretched endlessly before them, an eerie silence hanging in the air after the storm's fury. The sound of the waves lapping against the hull felt distant, almost dreamlike, as his mind replayed the strange encounter. He could still see the mermaid's form beneath the moonlit water, her otherworldly presence as vivid in his memory as the crash of the storm. Someone, it wasn't a figure he could easily dismiss, not now. She had saved him, yes, but there was more to it. She had spoken of a prophecy, of their fates being bound together, and it stirred something deep within him, something he couldn't yet understand but knew he had to unravel. Liam watched his captain closely, noting the intensity in Adrian's gaze as he stared out at the sea, lost in his thoughts. "What do you mean, Captain?" Liam asked, unable to hide the curiosity in his voice. He had sailed with Adrian for years, seen him face countless challenges without flinching, yet this moment felt different. There was an unspoken weight in the air, a feeling that something monumental had just begun, and neither of them fully grasped its significance. The crew, still reeling from the storm, had started to get back to work, but Liam remained at Adrian's side, unwilling to let the moment pass without seeking more answers. The encounter with the mermaid, the strange prophecy, the storm itself, it all seemed far too extraordinary to be a mere coincidence. Adrian turned his gaze back to Liam, a flicker of determination crossing his features. "There's a story here, Liam," he said, his voice steady but filled with an underlying intensity. "A story that goes far beyond anything we've encountered on this ship. What happened tonight, it's part of something ancient, something profound, and I have a feeling that this is only the beginning of it." His words were heavy with the weight of the unknown, the certainty that they had crossed the threshold into a world that defied all logic. Adrian was a man of the sea, a captain whose life had been shaped by the unpredictable forces of nature, but this felt different. It was as if the very ocean had shifted beneath their feet, revealing a deeper, hidden layer of its power. one that was now intertwined with their fate. He didn't fully understand it yet, but he could sense that whatever lay ahead, it would change everything. Liam processed Adrian's words, his brow furrowing in thought. He had seen his captain face down impossible odds before, but the certainty in Adrian's voice now was different. There was no bravado, no swagger. Adrian was a man who lived on instinct, who made decisions with a sharpness that came from years at sea. But now, there was something in his eyes that hinted at a fear of the unknown. Liam could feel it too, that unease creeping into his own thoughts. The storm had been terrifying, yes, but it was the strange appearance of the mermaid, and the prophecy she had spoken that loomed in his mind. Their fates were bound together. What did that mean? And why had she chosen to save Adrian, of all people? The answers to those questions were buried somewhere beneath the surface, hidden in the mysteries of the ocean, but they were questions that couldn't be ignored. Adrian exhaled slowly, his mind still spinning with fragments of the mermaid's words. I've sailed these waters for years, Liam, and I've never felt anything like this. This connection to the sea, to something older than anything we've ever known, it's like it's been waiting for us. For me. He shook his head, as if trying to make sense of his own thoughts. I don't know where it will lead, but I'm certain we're about to uncover something that will change everything. And I need you to be ready. We all need to be ready. His voice grew firmer, more resolute. He had never been one to shy away from the unknown, but now, with the weight of destiny pressing down on him, he understood that their journey had just become far more dangerous and far more significant than he could have ever imagined. The crew would need to trust him, follow him, because what was coming next would require more than just courage. It would require understanding, strength, and the willingness to face a truth that might shatter everything they thought they knew about the world they sailed. As the crew moved about, making final repairs to the Crimson Tempest, the sounds of hammers and rope being tightened filled the air. The night had settled in, its quiet broken only by the creaking of the ship and the soft splash of water against the hull. Adrian stood at the bow, staring out at the still waters, his mind far from the mundane tasks of maintenance. Despite the exhaustion that clung to him from the storm and the ordeal of being pulled from the sea, his thoughts remained tangled with the memory of Serena, the mysterious guardian of the reef. The way she had appeared from the depths, her ethereal form glowing in the storm's chaos, was seared into his mind. There was something about her, something ancient and knowing, that hinted at a much larger story than he could yet comprehend. As the crew worked around him, he couldn't shake the feeling that the encounter had only marked the beginning of something far more profound. Adrian knew that the prophecy Serena had spoken of was no coincidence. The mermaid had claimed that their fates were bound together, but what did that really mean? He had spent his life on the sea, navigating treacherous waters and facing down adversaries, but never had he encountered something so otherworldly. The ocean, once a realm he understood, now seemed vast and mysterious in ways he could not grasp. Serena's warning echoed in his mind. The balance of the reef had been disturbed, and with it, something had shifted within the very fabric of the sea itself. The magical forces that ruled the waters now seemed to have a purpose, one that extended beyond the survival of a single ship or crew. What role was he destined to play in all of this? And how would their journey unfold now that his fate had intertwined with hers? As the ship swayed gently in the calm after the storm, Adrian's thoughts wandered back to Serena's words. Our fates are bound. The phrase resonated deeply within him, carrying a weight he could not yet fully understand. He had seen too much of the sea's power to dismiss it as mere coincidence. Serena was a part of something ancient, something that had existed long before the first sailors set foot on these waters. And now, by some twist of fate, he had been drawn into that world. The prophecies spoke of a time when someone would come to the reef, someone with the potential to change everything. Was that someone him? And if so, what was the true cost of fulfilling that destiny? The crew, oblivious to the turmoil brewing within their captain, carried on with their tasks. They worked tirelessly, patching up the damage caused by the storm, knowing the ship could not remain in its weakened state for long. Yet Adrian remained distant, his focus unshakable. He knew that they could repair the ship, but the true repairs lay ahead, the unraveling of the mystery that had been thrust upon them. He could sense the weight of the journey ahead pressing down on him. It was not merely about surviving the dangers of the sea or outmaneuvering enemies. It was about understanding the forces at play and finding a way to navigate the deeper currents that now guided his path. As the crew settled down for the night, taking turns on watch and seeking rest in the quiet lull that followed the storm, Adrian remained on deck, his thoughts consumed by the vision of Serena in the depths. He knew that their encounter was not a chance event. Something greater was at work, and the events of the past few days were only the first steps down a path he could not turn away from. He was no stranger to the sea's unpredictable nature, but this felt like a call to something more, something that would shape the future of both the crew and the world they sailed. As the ship rocked gently, the stars above seemed to offer no answers, only the certainty that the adventure ahead would be fraught with more mysteries than he could ever have anticipated. The journey had just begun. Chapter 16: Shared Goals. The cavern's soft, ethereal glow cast gentle shadows over the two travelers as they sat side by side, the quiet murmur of the reef's magic echoing around them. In the silence, the magnitude of their shared journey began to sink in, deepening the bond between them. What had started as two separate quests, each fueled by personal desires and burdens, had now converged into a singular mission. The weight of their respective goals, the curse Serena carried and the treasure Adrian sought, was no longer an individual burden to bear but a shared responsibility. This understanding shifted the dynamic between them, transforming their connection from one of mere alliance to one of partnership and mutual respect. As they exchanged thoughts and insights, their words revealed the depth of their realization. Their destinies were no longer distant or disconnected. They were intertwined, each challenge they faced now an opportunity to move forward together. The treasure Adrian sought, once an elusive prize, now held the promise of healing, not just for his own past, but for Serena's curse and the reef's troubled history. Serena, too, began to see the treasure not as an artifact of power but as a vital part of her own freedom, a way to lift the darkness that bound her to the reef. In this moment, they both understood that their paths were aligned in a way neither had anticipated. The newfound camaraderie between them became the foundation for their next steps. They were no longer just two individuals with separate missions. They were allies, bound by a common cause. Each glance and each shared word seemed to reinforce the unspoken trust that had formed between them. There was no longer any doubt about the importance of their unity, and in each other, they found the strength to face the challenges ahead. The weight of the past was still heavy, but it was lighter now, shared between them. Together, they could face the trials of the reef, not just as adventurers, but as two souls who understood the significance of the journey they were on. The cavern's dim light seemed to reflect the quiet certainty that now filled their hearts. Their goals were no longer fragmented but fused into a singular vision for the future. They were ready to face the unknown, knowing that they had something stronger than their individual quests, each other. The trials of the reef, the darkness of Serena's curse, and the treasure that eluded Adrian were no longer insurmountable. With their paths intertwined, the challenges ahead became less daunting. The bond they had formed in this quiet moment would be the strength they carried into the depths of the reef, ready to unlock its secrets and restore what had been lost. Adrian leaned back slightly, his eyes tracing the dim outlines of the cavern walls as he absorbed the weight of Serena's words. The magnitude of their shared journey felt more profound now, as if the very air around them had shifted to accommodate their newfound understanding. "It's incredible how our quests are so closely linked," he said slowly, his voice rich with both awe and determination. The realization that their goals weren't merely parallel but deeply intertwined seemed to ground him, giving his mission a greater sense of purpose. This wasn't just about treasure anymore or a way to break a curse. It was about restoring balance to a place that had been ravaged by time and dark magic, and the two of them had a chance to make it right. His thoughts drifted to the treasure, once a singular pursuit to honor his father's memory, now transformed into something much greater. The artifacts he sought were no longer just relics of power, but possibly keys to breaking the curse that bound Serena. Adrian's mind raced with the implications. If the treasure could indeed help lift the darkness haunting the reef, Then his father's quest had a deeper meaning than he had ever anticipated. Breaking the curse and finding the treasure, these goals are not just parallel. Adrian continued, his gaze locking with Serena's. They're intertwined. We're not just trying to achieve separate ends. Everything we do here impacts both of us. Serena's presence beside him felt even more vital now. She wasn't just an ally or a guardian. She was the living thread that connected his journey with the reef's fate. Her curse was not just a tragedy to be resolved, but a catalyst that linked their destinies. The stakes were higher than either of them had realized. If they succeeded, they would not only free Serena from her eternal prison but also restore the balance to the reef, healing both the land and their hearts in the process. Adrian felt a surge of responsibility in his chest as he looked at her, knowing the weight of their combined mission could be the very thing that kept them moving forward, no matter the challenges ahead. Adrian's voice grew stronger as he continued, the fire of determination now clearly evident in his words. We're in this together, Serena. The treasure and the curse, they're not separate anymore. The same dark magic that twisted the reef is the force we have to face if we're going to succeed. But together, we have a chance. The bond between them felt more solid now, a shared commitment that transcended the personal stakes of their individual quests. With each passing moment, Adrian felt more certain of the path they were walking, two travelers bound by fate, ready to face the challenges of the magical reef and unlock its deepest secrets. Serena nodded, her expression turning contemplative as her gaze swept over the softly glowing walls of the cavern. The ancient murals, with their depictions of the reef's once thriving kingdom, seemed to echo the weight of her words. Yes, she said thoughtfully, her voice quiet but firm. It seems that our paths were meant to converge. The treasure could be the key to breaking the curse, and resolving the curse could reveal the true nature of the treasure. Her tone carried a deep certainty, as though the pieces of a long unfolding puzzle were finally falling into place. She glanced at Adrian, her eyes reflecting both hope and determination. The intertwining of their quests felt almost fated, a realization that gave Serena a renewed sense of purpose. For years, she had shouldered the burden of the curse alone, convinced that it was her solitary duty as the reef's guardian. But now, with Adrian at her side, the weight of that responsibility seemed lighter. His presence, and his mission, offered something she had not dared to hope for, a partnership in a journey that could rewrite the reef's history. If the treasure holds the answers we seek, she continued, her voice steady despite the emotion stirring within her, then its purpose must go beyond wealth or power. It may be the key to healing the damage caused by the sorcerer's betrayal and restoring the balance the reef once knew. Adrian nodded, his expression mirroring Serena's resolve. The connection between the curse and the treasure now felt undeniable, as though their individual quests were threads woven into the same intricate tapestry. He could see how their successes and failures were intertwined, each relying on the other to reach a resolution. If that's true, he said, his voice low but resolute, then we need to approach the trials ahead with that in mind. Every step we take could reveal not only clues to the treasure's location, but also the truth behind the curse. It's all connected, every challenge, every mystery, every choice we make. As the two of them sat in the stillness of the cavern, the enormity of their shared task pressed heavily on them, but it also fueled their determination. The idea that their quests were one and the same made every trial ahead seem less daunting. They weren't just fighting for their individual goals anymore. They were fighting for each other and the future of the reef itself. Serena straightened, a new strength in her posture as she looked at Adrian. We move forward together, she said, her voice resolute. No matter what we face, we'll uncover the truth and restore what was lost. Adrian met her gaze, and for the first time, he felt not just the weight of his father's legacy but also the immense power of a shared destiny. Adrian leaned forward, his gaze unwavering as he looked into Serena's eyes. The glow of the enchanted cavern reflected in his determination, casting subtle highlights on his features. Our goals are aligned, he began, his voice steady yet filled with conviction. In a way, this makes our mission even more significant. By working together, we're not just pursuing personal objectives, we're addressing a greater purpose. The weight of his words seemed to echo in the chamber, reverberating against the walls adorned with the history they were now part of. His expression carried both seriousness and hope, as if he could see the vast implications of their quest stretching out before them. Serena listened intently, her own thoughts racing as Adrian's words resonated deeply. He was right. This wasn't just about her burden or his legacy anymore. The reef's magic, the curse, and the treasure were threads in a much larger tapestry, one that connected their lives to the fate of something far greater. She nodded slowly, her voice thoughtful. You're right. This isn't just about breaking the curse or uncovering the treasure's secrets. It's about restoring balance to the reef, healing the damage done by the sorcerer, and honoring the sacrifices of those who came before us. Together, we can achieve what neither of us could accomplish alone. Adrian's confidence grew as he saw Serena's resolve deepen. Exactly, he said, his tone encouraging. Each trial we face, every clue we uncover, it all serves a larger purpose. And knowing that we're working towards something greater than ourselves makes every challenge worthwhile. His gaze shifted briefly to the murals surrounding them, as if drawing strength from the stories they depicted. This isn't just a journey for us, it's a chance to rewrite the fate of this reef and the lives tied to it. And we owe it to ourselves and to the people who once called this place home to see it through. The two of them sat in reflective silence for a moment, the magnitude of their mission settling over them like a mantle. But instead of feeling daunted, they felt emboldened. Their shared determination seemed to transform the cavern's quiet stillness into a space filled with potential. Serena's lips curved into a small, resolute smile as she spoke. Then we press on, with our goals united. Whatever lies ahead, we face it together, knowing that we're not just chasing a treasure or lifting a curse, we're reclaiming a legacy and forging a new future. Adrian returned her smile, the spark of partnership and purpose in his eyes illuminating the path they had chosen to walk as one. Serena's eyes locked onto Adrian's, a spark of newfound resolve lighting their depths. Her voice, steady yet tinged with a quiet determination, broke the silence. I agree, she said firmly. The curse that binds me to this reef and the treasure your father sought are pieces of a larger mystery, one that neither of us can unravel alone. But together, we stand a chance. Combining our efforts isn't just a choice, it's the only way forward. Her words carried a weight that resonated deeply, both in their immediate significance and in the broader implications of their shared journey. Adrian listened intently, nodding as he considered her perspective. You're right, he replied, his tone reflective yet filled with a growing sense of purpose. Understanding the reef's magic is key, not just to breaking the curse, but also to unlocking the truth behind the heart of the reef. Whatever power it holds, it's connected to the treasure and the legacy it represents. If we can uncover those secrets, we'll not only achieve our personal goals but also restore what was lost to time and tragedy. His words hung in the air, laden with the weight of the past and the promise of what could be. Serena's gaze shifted briefly to the murals surrounding them, their ancient artistry depicting the very story they were now living. The heart of the reef isn't just a magical artifact, she said thoughtfully, her voice soft but resolute. It's a symbol of everything this reef once stood for: harmony, balance, and protection. If we can uncover its truth and harness its power, we might not only lift the curse but also restore the reef to what it was meant to be. That's a legacy worth fighting for, and it's one I'm willing to share with you. Their eyes met again, the air between them charged with a shared understanding. In that moment, the boundaries of their individual quests dissolved, replaced by a united front against the challenges that lay ahead. Adrian extended a hand, and Serena clasped it firmly, their grip a silent vow. Together, they would navigate the treacherous waters of the reef, not as separate individuals with separate missions, but as partners united by purpose and bound by growing trust. Whatever trials awaited, they would face them side by side, their resolve stronger than ever. Adrian nodded, a determined smile playing across his lips as conviction settled over him. It's clear now, he said, his voice steady and purposeful, that our collaboration is crucial. Neither of us can do this alone. The trials ahead are as much a test of unity as they are of strength. If we want to succeed, we need to approach them with a unified strategy, blending our individual strengths and insights. His words carried an undeniable truth, one that seemed to echo in the cavern's ancient stillness. For the first time, Adrian felt that their paths were not merely converging by chance but were deliberately intertwined by the reef's wall. Serena met his gaze, her eyes filled with agreement and resolve. "You're right," she replied, her voice calm but filled with a quiet intensity. "The reef's enchantments are designed to challenge us on every level, physically, mentally, even emotionally. Together, we bring different perspectives and skills to the table, and that's what will give us an edge. Your resourcefulness and determination, combined with my understanding of the reef's magic, can form a balance the reef might not expect." She paused, her expression thoughtful. "But more than that, we need to trust each other completely. These trials won't just test our abilities, they'll test our bond." Adrian considered her words, a sense of gravity settling in his chest. "Trust," he echoed, his tone reflective. "That's going to be the foundation of everything we do from here on out. The reef isn't just throwing random challenges at us, it's gauging our ability to work together, to adapt and overcome as a team. If we hesitate, if we doubt each other, even for a moment, we risk everything." He took a deep breath, his determined smile softening into something more earnest. "But I trust you, Serena. And I'll do everything I can to make sure we succeed, not just for my father's legacy or the treasure, but for you and the reef as well." Serena's expression softened, her resolve tempered with gratitude. "And I trust you, Adrian," she said sincerely. "I've carried this burden alone for so long, but now I feel like I don't have to anymore. With you by my side, I truly believe we can overcome whatever the reef throws at us." The two of them sat in contemplative silence for a moment, the glow of the cavern's light reflecting their shared determination. In that instant, the enormity of their task seemed less daunting. They were no longer two individuals pursuing separate goals, but a unified force, ready to face the unknown together. Serena's expression softened, her features reflecting both relief and determination as the weight of her words settled between them. "Yes," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Breaking the curse will not only free me from its hold but also potentially unlock the secrets of the treasure. These two goals aren't just connected, they're two sides of the same coin. If we're going to succeed, we need to focus on our shared objectives and commit ourselves fully to this mission." Her words carried a renewed sense of purpose, as though voicing the connection between their quests had solidified her resolve. Adrian nodded, understanding the gravity of what Serena was saying. "You're right," he replied, leaning slightly forward. "This isn't just about finding a way through the trials. It's about embracing the fact that we're stronger together. Every step we take, every challenge we face, is an opportunity to learn more about the reef and about ourselves. We're not just fighting for our own goals anymore, we're fighting for something far greater." His voice was firm, his conviction unmistakable, and for the first time, the daunting task ahead felt like a surmountable challenge. Serena's gaze lingered on Adrian, her appreciation for his determination evident in the way her lips curved into a small, grateful smile. "And that's why we'll succeed," she said, her tone resolute. "Because we're not afraid to lean on each other, to share our strengths and shoulder the burdens together. The reef's magic is unpredictable, but it's also purposeful. I believe it's testing not just our abilities but our unity. If we can prove that we're a true team, I think we'll find the answers we're looking for." She paused, her eyes flickering to the glowing murals around them, as though drawing strength from the ancient stories they depicted. Adrian followed her gaze, letting the moment of quiet contemplation ground them. The light from the enchanted crystal seemed to pulse gently, as if in rhythm with their shared determination. "Then let's make that our focus," he said at last, his voice soft but resolute. "No matter what we face, we'll face it together. One trial at a time, one mystery unraveled at a time." He extended a hand toward Serena, and she took it without hesitation. Their clasped hands were a silent vow, a testament to the partnership they had forged and the shared mission that now bound them as firmly as the reef's enchantments bound its secrets. Adrian rose to his feet, the faint glow of the cavern casting determined shadows across his face. He extended a hand toward Serena, his expression resolute but kind. "Then let's continue this journey with renewed purpose," he said, his voice firm yet warm. "We're no longer just allies navigating the same waters. We're partners, bound by a quest that not only aligns our goals but strengthens our resolve." His words carried a weight that resonated deeply, emphasizing the unity they had forged through their shared revelations and hardships. Serena looked up at him, a flicker of surprise and gratitude passing through her eyes before she reached for his hand. His grip was steady, anchoring her in a way she hadn't expected. Rising to stand beside him, she felt a sense of determination growing within her, fed by the clarity of their purpose. "Partners," she echoed softly, as though testing the word. Then, more firmly, she added, "That's exactly what we need to be. The reef's magic has tested us as individuals, but I have no doubt that it will challenge us even more as a team. If we trust in each other, we can overcome whatever lies ahead." Together, they turned toward the pathway that led deeper into the reef, the cavern walls seeming to shimmer as though in agreement with their resolve. The glow of the bioluminescent crystals reflected off the ancient murals, the stories etched into the stone feeling alive with relevance to their mission. Adrian glanced at Serena, her profile illuminated by the soft light. "We'll face it all, every trial, every challenge, with this understanding," he said. "Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that no treasure, no victory, is ever truly achieved alone." Serena met his gaze, her expression steady and filled with a quiet strength. "And no curse is broken without understanding and perseverance," she replied. "Together, we'll uncover the truth of this reef, not just for ourselves but for everyone connected to its history and magic. The queen, the treasure, the curse, they're all pieces of the same puzzle." With a nod, they stepped forward into the unknown, their shared mission lighting the way as they prepared to face whatever mysteries awaited them in the depths of the magical reef. Serena grasped Adrian's hand, her smile warm with a blend of camaraderie and renewed determination. The gesture, though simple, spoke volumes, a pact between two individuals now bound by shared purpose and trust. "Agreed," she said, her voice steady and sure. "Together, we'll face the challenges and uncover the mysteries that lie ahead." Her words carried a quiet strength, affirming their commitment to each other and the journey they had undertaken. For the first time in a long while, she felt the heavy burden of her curse lighten, knowing she wasn't carrying it alone anymore. Adrian's lips curved into a smile that mirrored her own, the sense of unity between them palpable. "Our shared goals will guide us," Serena continued, her gaze unwavering as she looked into his eyes. "And our combined efforts will lead us to success." She glanced at the glowing murals around them, each depicting tales of trials and triumphs. They seemed to draw inspiration from the very walls of the cavern, as though the stories of the past were cheering them on. Serena could feel the resonance of those ancient struggles in her own journey and knew that their alliance was a pivotal step toward rewriting the reef's fate. They stood there for a moment longer, their hands clasped, as though sealing their resolve with the silent language of trust. The faint, bioluminescent glow cast their shadows across the cavern walls, blending them into the murals as if their story was now part of the reef's ancient narrative. Serena's smile faded slightly, replaced by an expression of focused determination. "We'll need to stay vigilant," she said. "Every step we take brings us closer to the truth, but it also means facing greater dangers. The reef won't make this easy for us." Adrian nodded, releasing her hand but holding on to the sense of unity they had just forged. "No, it won't," he agreed. "But if we keep our eyes on the bigger picture and rely on each other, there's nothing we can't face. We've already come this far, and I have no doubt we'll find the strength to go even further." As they turned toward the path leading deeper into the reef, their strides were purposeful and aligned. The weight of their shared mission and the promise of uncovering the reef's secrets propelled them forward, ready to meet the trials that awaited with unwavering resolve. As they prepared to leave the cavern, the air between Adrian and Serena was charged with an unspoken understanding. The dim glow of bioluminescent algae reflected off the damp walls, casting an ethereal light on their faces. Each glance exchanged carried a depth that words couldn't capture, a mutual recognition of how far they had come. The cavern, once a foreboding maze of shadows and dangers, now felt like a sanctuary that had solidified their bond. The trials they had faced within its confines had tested not just their physical endurance, but their ability to trust and rely on one another completely. The magical reef stretched out before them, its mysteries waiting to be uncovered. For Adrian, the adventure ahead represented more than just discovery. It was a chance to protect something greater than himself, and Serena was an anchor in that mission. Her unyielding resolve and sharp instincts were a constant source of inspiration, reminding him why they were here. He adjusted the straps of his gear, his movements steady despite the weight of anticipation. With each step toward the reef, he felt the connection between them strengthening, as if the challenges they had yet to face were already weaving them together in unbreakable threads of trust. Serena, too, felt the shift in their partnership. Her heart swelled with a mixture of pride and gratitude as she observed Adrian's unwavering focus. He had grown more attuned to the reef's rhythms, and his ability to adapt to its unpredictable nature mirrored her own. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was navigating the unknown alone. Their shared purpose gave her a sense of belonging, and it was this unity that emboldened her to push forward. The cavern had tested her independence, but it had also shown her the strength in having a companion whose goals aligned so seamlessly with hers. As they stepped out of the cavern and into the reef's open expanse, a new wave of determination washed over them. The vibrant, otherworldly coral formation seemed to pulse with life, a reminder of the beauty they were fighting to preserve. They moved in sync, their steps mirroring the rhythm of their shared resolve. Whatever trials lay ahead, they were ready to face them together. The reef's magic wasn't just in its physical wonders, it was in the way it forged bonds, testing and transforming those who dared to explore it. For Adrian and Serena, it was no longer just an exploration. It was a journey that defined who they were becoming, individually and as a team. With their destinies now intertwined, Adrian and Serena stood at the threshold of the unknown, the flickering light of the reef casting vivid hues across their determined faces. The weight of their mission was undeniable, yet it carried a strange sense of clarity. They had come to understand that this journey wasn't just about breaking a curse or uncovering treasure. It was about discovering the depths of their own strengths and the power of unity. The realization filled them with a renewed purpose, sharpening their focus as they prepared to navigate the reef's uncharted waters. Each step forward felt like a declaration of defiance against the challenges that awaited them. The magical reef loomed ahead, a labyrinth of glowing coral spires and whispering currents. Its beauty was both enchanting and deceptive, hiding dangers that would test even the most seasoned explorers. Adrian glanced at Serena, his expression firm yet tinged with admiration. She moved with a quiet confidence, her gaze scanning their surroundings with practiced precision. Her resolve was unshakable, and it mirrored his own. Together, they had become a team forged by necessity and strengthened by trust. Their shared understanding of the stakes, not just for themselves but for the lives intertwined with the reef's mysteries, bound them in ways neither had expected. As the journey continued, the challenges came swiftly and without mercy. Unpredictable currents forced them to adapt, while the reef itself seemed to shift, its ever-changing pathways keeping them on edge. Yet, each obstacle only deepened their bond. Adrian's strength and quick thinking complemented Serena's agility and resourcefulness, their synergy a testament to the unity they had cultivated. Every success, no matter how small, felt like a victory not just against the reef's perils but against the doubts that once lingered in their minds. With each passing trial, they found themselves relying less on spoken words and more on the unspoken language of shared resolve and determination. Finally, as the day's light began to fade, the reef transformed under the deep blues of twilight, its bioluminescence growing ever brighter. Adrian and Serena paused briefly, the stillness allowing them to reflect on how far they had come. The treasure and the promise of breaking the curse still lay ahead, distant yet tangible. But in this moment, the journey itself felt equally significant. The reef had not only tested their resolve but had shown them the strength found in unity, and the courage born from shared purpose. As they stood together, poised to continue their quest, there was no doubt in their hearts that they were ready for whatever challenges the magical reef had yet to reveal.